Recently, I've seen a lot of people talking about the camera in the gameplay showcase for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, and there's a lot of people on the fence about it. Some people really like it. They think it's intuitive. They think it's immersive, and other people think that it's going to ruin their entire experience, and they're not going to be able to play the game if that camera does not get changed. So I wanted to kind of give my take on this one. I think it's an interesting topic to talk about as a person who thought it was a little jarring at first when I was watching the actual showcase, but when I watched it back, I actually realized what they're going for and why I think that it's not actually that bad. It just needs a little bit of tweaking. So first and foremost, let's talk about what they're going for, right? So what are they trying to do with this new camera, right? Are they just trying to throw something in to be funky and cool? I mean, sort of, yeah. But the reason behind it is to be more immersive. So a lot of the time, whenever you're playing a game like this, the whole idea is to make you immersed in the world, right? They're trying to make you kind of feel more connected in some way. So there's a lot of ways that they do this, especially with speed and the way that you perceive speed when it comes to these type of games. So like the hair flowing in the wind, the clothes, those speed lines and stuff like that to indicate how fast somebody's going, right? And in a game like this, which is starting to look like it's picking up the pace in terms of combat, bro. So I've been playing a lot of Budokai Tenkaichi 4, the modded version of 3, and you start to realize how slow that game actually is once you start kind of playing it. So whenever you look at Sparking Zero, this game is really quick. You got vanishes, you've got all kinds of micro dashing and stuff like that. It does seem like there's going to be a lot of quick time movements in terms of like, you know, micro dashing and stuff like that and getting out of situations. So this game is going to play a lot quicker. And what they're trying to do is kind of showcase what it looks like, what it feels like, right? They're trying to give you an idea of why and how and what it feels like to go that quick and just giving you another level of immersion. Now, with that being said, I think that's a great idea. I think it's cool. It's something we definitely haven't seen. And it really is just one of those things that kind of tick up, you know, kind of a little excite meter for me, because it's like, oh, this is kind of nice. This is something we haven't really seen. They're experimenting a little bit, but the idea is that it's a little almost too jarring, and I'm going to explain why. So if you look at our traditional Budokai Tenkaichi games, it's more of like a stagnant on rails type of camera, right? So you're pretty much set in this position. You can obviously rotate it, but the premise is that you're behind your character most of the time, right? There's a couple instances where maybe you're stacked up against a rock or something like that, and that goes into a 2D outline, and you're kind of fighting that way. So the camera can get a little bit wonky, right? But for the most part, you know where it's going to go. You kind of know exactly what to expect. It's predictable on where the camera is going to be for the most part. Now this one, it seems like it's going to be a little bit all over the place in terms of which way you're moving and what you're trying to do, which could be kind of an issue if you're looking at like ranking or like competitive gameplay and stuff like that. But I think the real issue here is that it's so jarring in the sense that it's kind of like moving back and forth so fast. So if we kind of go back to the example that I used, that it's stagnant and on rails for the old games, this is more like you're on a kite or maybe like a hot air balloon and you're kind of stuck by ropes instead of rails, like metal rails, right? So the idea here, at least what I'm thinking they're going for, is when the character moves, you have like a little bit of a delay. So you're kind of like, whoo, floating in the wind behind the character, because this gives you a sense of like movement, right? If the camera's not fixated in like going straight to each movement, you kind of feel the way that you're moving, right? If they go to the left, it's not instant. You kind of feel that you're going with them. But in this gameplay showcase, it was a little jarring because of how fast the combat starts to be. So they started doing vanishes, and now you're like boom, 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 boom. It looks like you're kind of bouncing like a bouncy ball in a small room. So now you're just kind of all over the place, and it seems like it's a little jarring because it is, right? It's because you don't have room to kind of have that nice free flow and kind of go through it. So the real issue here is the smoothing of the animation, and that's something that's obviously going to happen because the game's under development, right? So it's kind of hard to critique stuff like this when it comes to like kind of little things like that, because in the reality of it, smoothing transitions like that is kind of like on the back end of it, right? That's kind of like the touch-ups. That's like making sure the hair sticks on and stuff like that when you're fighting and all that different stuff. That's kind of like the touch-ups. You go back and you start to make sure that everything's kind of to a T before you release the game. So when it comes to this type of stuff, and I can give you like a real life example as a person who edits their own videos, if I want a text to come up on screen, right? There's a couple of ways to do this. First and foremost, just have the text pop up. Doesn't have anywhere, it doesn't have any origin point. Dude just pops up, right? Hey, it might be better than not having text, but it's a little jarring just to have text just randomly appear. Now, the second step would be to add a start and end point, right? So it kind of comes in, but this is still a little jarring. Like you see where it comes in, but it abruptly stops, and then it abruptly starts and it abruptly leaves, right? So it's just kind of like, there's no like smoothness, no slow down, no like, you know, kind of like smooth at it between when it starts and stops. So it seems very abrupt. So the final touch here would be to have it come in and then maybe sort of slow down, stop a little bit, and then kind of linger and then slowly start back up. So it just kind of has that nice little smoothness to it. So now it feels like it's like one fluid motion, feels like it's supposed to be there, it feels natural, it doesn't feel as jarring. But as you kind of look down at the different layers, each one's a little bit better than the last, right? So in this case, I think they have a good idea of what they're trying to do with something like this. It's just the fact that it's not as smooth as it could be. So it is a little jarring for a lot of people. I urge you guys to rewatch this a couple of times. I'm sure you guys have, but as you watch it, the more you realize that it's not really as jarring as you might think. And it starts to get kind of used to it as you kind of go progressing through it. And honestly, it might even be even better once you start playing with it, because again, it's hard to kind of tell what your perception on a game is going to be if you're watching it versus playing it. Because if you're actually in the combat itself, you're not going to focus too much on the jarring camera. You're going to be focusing on your opponent. You're going to be focusing on your abilities. You're going to be focused on maybe, your bars, your health bar, your key bar, your, whatever little status thing they have for your defense stuff. Like, you're going to be focusing on a lot of other stuff. So that might seem a little less jarring when you're actually in combat and doing it. So I do think that this is one of those things where I think it's kind of a catch-22. I think it's a nice little turn of events. I think it's cool that they're adding this. And really the only big thing is that they need to kind of smooth the transitions, especially when you're going into like vanishing and you're getting up close and personal. Because like I said, it feels like you're a bouncy ball in a small little box, bro. It feels like you're bouncing everywhere. And it gets a little overwhelming for a lot of people who are playing stuff like that. If you have like motion sickness, you don't like motion blur and stuff like that, I do think the ultimate like kind of way to do this would be to have them have it a toggle off option. So just like motion blur, some people like motion blur. It gives like kind of a cinematic feel to it, and it makes people feel a little bit more immersed, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people think of it as more of a hindrance, and they just kind of get motion sick, for lack of a better word, right? So maybe you'd want to use this for like story because you want to be more immersed. You kind of like the cinematic feel to it. And maybe whenever you're playing competitively or you're playing online, you don't want that. You want to be more predictable with your camera angles, and you don't want to have to worry about it jerking around all the time. So that would be like kind of when you toggle it off, and that's where you kind of stay for more competitive, more predictability. So honestly, if they were going to go that route, I would say it would be a toggle on and off switch, but I really think that it's probably here to stay. It just really needs to be smoothed out. But honestly, guys, let me know down in the comments if it really is that bad. This is just kind of my personal take on it, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good rest of your night, guys. Peace.